The Intolerance of Tolerance. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Our attention is brought to some philosophy, some social aspects, religion, political, and economics. We're going to try to rush through all this in about 15 minutes. This is so simple. Let's talk about the social first, right? If you claim that you are tolerant, you have to tolerate intolerance, which makes you intolerant. Did you get that? It's 15 seconds, and freshmen at Dallas Baptist University understand this. The rest of the world does not. Anybody who thinks logically realizes you can't be tolerant. It doesn't work. It's not logical. But the guys at Airbnb don't understand this. On November 13, they canceled the reservation of a guy who, because he was a member of the Proud Boys. As I record this today, I still don't know who the Proud Boys are, and I don't care. My point is, Airbnb claims to be tolerant and non-discriminatory, but they discriminated. Here's what the New York Post said on November 13. Quote, on Wednesday afternoon, Airbnb responded and said the reservation was canceled and the member had been banned. Continuing to quote, an Airbnb spokesman confirmed to the New York Post the man was banned from the platform, saying his association with the Proud Boys was enough for Airbnb to take action. The company assured that it would not cancel any reservations or ban regular folks attending the rally. End quote. Are you laughing with me? Regular. Who's regular and who's not regular? That's why I'm laughing at this. These guys claim that they're tolerant. Matter of fact, they have an anti-discrimination policy. Here's another one. The reason I'm interested in this, Ginger and I have a ski condominium at Angel Fire, New Mexico, and we rent it through Airbnb. And so I'm a member of this organization, so to speak, who just discriminated against somebody. And so I'm interested in this. But here's another something I got from them. Airbnb says, David, that's to me, quote, earlier this summer, we announced Project Lighthouse, an initiative to uncover, measure, and overcome discrimination when booking or hosting a home on Airbnb, end quote. Well, Airbnb, you're the discriminator. You just discriminated against somebody because they're a member of the Proud Boys. That is discrimination. Interesting, on Airbnb on their website, they say, we show no bias, prejudice, nor discrimination. Hey, Airbnb, you just did all three. You're trying to be tolerant, but you're being intolerant. This is just amazing to me. Oh, at the end of this Project Lighthouse thing that they sent to me, again, because I rent my condo on Airbnb, it is signed in solidarity, the Airbnb team. What? In solidarity of whom against whom? What do you mean in solidarity? Who are you solid with? You are solid with the people who discriminate against people because of his membership in a group. Matter of fact, in canceling a reservation, it made me wonder, I'm not a lawyer, but isn't there a Fair Housing Act in America? Can you actually deny housing to somebody? That's exactly what they did. This could get too long, but I'll make it as quick as I can. So I communicated with Airbnb when I saw this story in the New York Post on November 13, 2020. Here's my email to them on November 13. Quote, I read that Airbnb canceled the reservation of someone who communicated on a Proud Boys social website because they're a hate group. Where do I find the list of Airbnb designated hate groups so I will know not to rent to their members? And what techniques does Airbnb provide for me so I can determine if a potential renter is a member of a hate group? End quote. That's my email to them. Their answer back. Hi, David. My name is John, one of the support ambassadors of Airbnb. Airbnb does not have any list for designated hate groups. It is because Airbnb still wanted to pursue our mission to make everyone belong. End quote. You didn't complete your mission. Everybody doesn't belong. Members of Proud Boys can't rent from Airbnb. So here's my answer back to them, to Airbnb. You sent a quick but contradictory reply. Number one, Airbnb has canceled the rental of a person because they were associated with a group Airbnb has designated as a hate group. Number two, you wrote that Airbnb has not designated any hate groups. One of these statements is true and one is false. Which is it? Who am I prevented from renting to? End quote, my email to them. They didn't give an answer. But logic. Hey, this is just simple logic stuff, right? Get into philosophy just for a minute here. I teach at a liberal arts university. When the Romans decided that people could vote, they said, look, if you're going to vote, if you're going to have the power to vote, you have to understand your world. So they created what's called liberal arts. And the first three, the trivium, it's just a big word for three, are grammar, rhetoric, and logic. So you have to understand those before you can go on to what's called the quadrivium. But think about it. Logic. Airbnb does not understand logic. They said they don't discriminate, but they just did. They say there are no hate groups, but they just labeled one a hate group. Right? Think about it. Logic. Airbnb does not understand logic. In liberal arts, then you're able, after you understand grammar, rhetoric, and logic, you can go on to the quadrivium, just a big word for four, geometry, math, astronomy, and science. If you succeed there, then you can finally go on to the higher learning, which is theology and philosophy. Look, Airbnb is trying to do theology and philosophy, but they don't understand logic. As my freshmen at DBU do. Oh, that's a great country western song. You got to stand for something or you fall for anything. That's good philosophy, actually. That's country western philosophy. Airbnb doesn't stand for anything, so they've fallen for something, which is somebody complaining that a Proud Boys member rented one of their apartments. Oh, my goodness. Religion. Hey, listen. When Abraham decided or was told by God that there was only one God, the world changed. I mean, I just don't have time to get into this today. Before that, there were all kinds of gods, right? And so it was a relativist world. So your God said this, my God said this. It was relativism. When Abraham said there's only one God, see, that's where logic starts. And that's where the world changed. Because then you could have arguments about justice, about what was right and what was wrong. Because without God, there is no right and wrong. Or with multiple gods, there are multiple rights and wrongs, right? But Abraham said, no, there's only one God. Well, that gives us the Greek idea of logic, which goes to the Romans and then comes down to us some 2,000 years later. The idea that it's logical. There either are hate groups or they're not hate groups, right? It's one or the other. This starts with religion. It starts with your belief system. Look, I was in Hanoi on a project one time. We went out to dinner, sat by this lady who is a devoted Buddhist, and she just tells me calmly that she'd been praying to a god, but it wasn't working, so she switched gods. Well, I was stunned, as you probably were, but then I got to thinking, hold it. If you believe in multiple gods, why would you continue to pray to one who wasn't giving you what you wanted? I mean, see what I mean? And you see, that's how the world is in the Airbnb world. And that's where it is when you escape logic. When there are multiple gods, there can be multiple rights. But if you believe there's only one God, then you believe there has to be a right and wrong. Now, finding right and wrong as humans is quite hard to do. There's no question about that. But if you don't even assume that there's a right and wrong, then you can never find right and wrong. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. Look, everybody believes something. So I've already covered some social, some philosophy, some religion. Let's go into political, and yes, I'm an economist. We'll be there in about 5 minutes. I'm taking a course from Hillsdale on Constitution. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, sorry, it took me until the age of 66 to learn this. I hope you learned it earlier. And this professor from Hillsdale College on Constitution 101 online is explaining, he's quoting Madison and James Madison saying, well, if men were angels, we would need no government. Oh, I'm sorry it took me so long to figure this out. That's almost a direct quote from somebody a few hundred years later named Milton Friedman, an economist, who said, if we were all angels, socialism would work. Why is it at 66 I finally figured this out? The root of both political and economic freedom is the same thing. The assumption that people are fallen. I hope you figured this out before I did. And when I heard that, I pictured myself sitting in a little bookshop in San Diego. My wife was working and I was trailing her. Sitting in a bookshop and reading the introduction to a book called Dark Agenda by David Horowitz, who's an agnostic Jew. And he's praising the Christians who founded America because they understood the fallen nature and put in a system of checks and balances. See, this system of checks and balances is the same thing we have in economics. Why? Because we assume that people are fallen. If you assume people are fallen, you have politically a system of checks and balances. In economics, you have competition. For more on that, look at my podcast number 33 called Ending Discrimination. You cannot discriminate in a free market. Airbnb does not have a free market, right? It's a violation. This is where markets fail, when they're not free. It's not free because a member of Proud Boys cannot use the site. Now, what should happen is people should figure this out, that Airbnb discriminated, stop using them, and they should be punished economically. Will that happen? Somehow I doubt it. Yeah. I've got a little book called Economics and the Christian Worldview. And in there I make this statement, there are no rights in China because there's no right in China. Let me say it again. There are no rights in China because there's no right in China. I was at Hong Kong Baptist University listening to this seminar, and the guy's just fascinating. He's explaining how China works. And with the Noble Eightfold Path on a PowerPoint, behind him, he turns to us and says, there are no rights and wrongs in China. And I thought, hold it, that's what it says on your PowerPoint. There's 8. And yet you're stating exactly the opposite. But I sat and listened to the rest of his seminar. It was one of the most illuminating days of my life because it made me realize without some kind of a basic understanding of logic that there are rights and wrongs, who determines what is right and wrong? The guy with the biggest gun. That leads to my statement, there's no rights in China because there's no right in China. Back to Airbnb. What is right and what's wrong? Well, the guys at Airbnb determines whether you are regular or not, or I am regular or not. I mean, I'm a Baptist, and we get accused of being narrow-minded and judgmental. I doubt if a Proud Boys member has ever been locked out of a Baptist church, but they were locked out of Airbnb. Who's tolerant and who's not tolerant? Think about it, you guys, and think about where this comes from. The social part, the philosophy part, the religion part, the political part. Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban got into an ill-advised spat with Ted Cruz on Twitter, and it ended with Ted Cruz saying, well, Mark Cuban is an owner of the Dallas Mavericks and the NBA. Why don't you speak out against the civil rights violations in China? And Mark Cuban's answer was, I don't criticize other countries' behavior. Hold it. What'd you just say, Mark Cuban? Are you ready to tell the black players on your team and the black people who buy tickets to your event that in 1988 you would not have stood against apartheid in South Africa? Because it was in a different country. One of the guys I knew, Arthur Ashe, from my days in pro tennis, in 1988 was proud and was brave enough to stand in the streets of New York City and protest against apartheid, something that was going on in another country. Mark Cuban is not. What about it, Mark Cuban? What drives... See, life is so difficult when you don't have a rudder, when you don't have something that determines where you go. I'm finally going to get to economics here. See, so you also have to ask people like the NBA and Mark Cuban, well, what about Black Lives Matter? They are a Marxist organization. This is a fact. They are a Marxist. So they stand against private property. So if you paint BLM on your court, does that mean that you don't want people to own private NBA basketball teams as you do? I mean, think about it. This is as silly as Airbnb saying we have no hate groups. Logic. It's what I'm after today. And what I'm ending with is economics. See, that's why we like economic systems that are free market capitalist systems. When they are free, people are free to choose where to supply their goods and from where to demand their goods. And what we always want to know is, which direction is this moving us? Back to Airbnb. Discriminating, showing bias and prejudice against someone who wants to rent an apartment is not free. And what I want us to understand today is the root of both of these freedoms, economic and political freedoms. It comes out of religious and philosophy base that there is one God, that there is right and wrong, and that through seeking right and wrong, we can do so. That's why we have a political system that has checks and balances. That's why we have an economic system that has essentially checks and balances, meaning competition. If you don't like where you're being served, go somewhere else. And again, I refer you to podcast 33, Ending Discrimination. You know, in politics, when something goes wrong, if there's corruption, they'll say, follow the money. You know what we say in economics? Follow the self-interest. What is the self-interest? So what is the self-interest of Airbnb? What is the self-interest of Mark Cuban? If people are exercising their self-interest and they don't have a rudder, they don't have this base, they don't have this assumptional religious and philosophical beginning, they will get off track, as Airbnb did. See, this is why economists like free market economies, because it's free. People are free to buy from whom they want, to sell in an open market. There's no discrimination. So the topic today, the intolerance of tolerance. Look, it's a circular argument that my freshman could argue away in 30 seconds. But in economics, you have to tolerate others or you could not succeed. That's why we like a competitive market. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.